Happy Mother's Day, everyone!
Happy Mother's Day! Happy Mother's Day! Happy Mother's Day!
Happy Mother's Day!
Happy Mother's Day!
Happy Mother's Day! I love Mommy! Happy Mother's Day! Happy Mother's Day!
Happy Mother's Day!
Happy Mother's Day.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to LBC Online. If you've only just recently joined LBC Online, you might not know who I am, so I'd just like to introduce myself. My name's Judy, and I'm on the staff here at LBC. Now, most of you know that I have been unwell recently, and I still don't know what's wrong with me. In fact, a good friend of mine offered to send me a list. Thank you, friend. But I feel okay right now, and I'm just waiting to have a couple of doctor's appointments. But I would really like to thank all of you for the outpouring of love and concern and prayers that Eric and I both experienced during these past couple of weeks. It's been amazing, and you are a wonderful LBC family. So I thank God for each one of you. I'd just like to ask you today, this morning, in your prayers, if you would remember the Nute family, Bryce and Ingrid and family. Ingrid's father died a couple of weeks ago in Cameroon from cancer. And this is just, it's always hard when you lose a parent, but even harder when you're so far away and we're going through COVID-19. So I would ask if you would please remember them in your prayers and ask for God's comfort and that He would be especially close to them at this difficult time. Thank you. So today we are celebrating ladies. Ladies, we are uniquely made, created, and loved by God. He has each hair of our head counted. Some of those hairs are getting longer and whiter by the minute, but they're still counted. And what a wonderful feeling that each one of us was made for a purpose. And so today we want to celebrate each one of you. And we're going to do that during COVID-19 by a coffee and donuts drive-through. So please wait until Cody's finished preaching, but when he has, if you would like to get in the car and drive to LBC, please enter through the Ladner Trunk Road entrance and come to the side door, that's the west door. We would be glad to serve you with a specialty coffee of your choice and some donuts, not just for you, but for your whole family. If you can't make it for some reason, please let one of us know and we'd be happy to deliver to you. We also allow walk-ups if you don't have a car. So looking forward to seeing lots of you later today. Thank you.
You bring light to the dark. Good morning, welcome, happy Mother's Day. Mom, I hope you're having a great morning so far. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Cody. I'm part of the pastoral staff here at LBC. I specifically oversee community groups and discipleship ministries, which are still happening. So if you'd like to get connected to our community, or if you just want to talk about what the next step might be in your path of following Jesus, I'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email. It's Cody@Ladner Baptist. I look forward to seeing some of you after the service today. We're doing a drive-through coffee and donuts for all the ladies to celebrate Mother's Day. And if you can't make it, don't worry. I will happily eat a donut on your behalf. In fact, maybe you can just stay home. Now, more donuts works for me. We're in our series through Ephesians still. We're in chapter 6 today, finally getting close to the end. And we've been in this section of Ephesians where Paul is giving the details of what it looks like to be imitators of Christ, to what it means to walk in wisdom, filled with the Spirit, and what it looks like to submit to one another out of reverence for Christ, and how by submitting in the way that Jesus modeled for us, how he humbled himself, set aside his throne to serve and sacrifice so that we would be reconciled to him, how we have the opportunity to illustrate this, to give testament to the gospel through the way that we submit to one another. Last fall, we as a church went through the book of Philippians, and in that, Paul instructs how we can be imitators of Christ by valuing others above ourselves, by putting the interests of others above our own. At the end of Ephesians 5 now, he explains what that looks like in the context of a marriage. How we can have a marriage that's framed by the gospel so that it serves as an illustration of what Jesus has done for the church. Today we're going to look at how that works out in a few different relationships. Reading chapter 6 of Ephesians, starting in verse 1. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, with a sincere heart, as you would Christ, not by way of eye service as people pleasers, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart, rendering service with a good will as to the Lord and not to man, knowing that whatever good anyone does, this he will receive back from the Lord, whether he is slave or free. Masters, do the same to them, and stop your threatening, knowing that he who is both their master and yours is in heaven, and that there is no partiality with him. Paul starts this section by addressing children directly. And it's easy to miss, but that's significant for a couple of reasons. For one, in Greco-Roman writing, especially this formal style of family codes like this, you don't address children. If anything, you address the parents and you tell the parents what to say to the children. So Paul, in doing this, is actually showing an unusual amount of dignity to the children. He's also revealing to us that they were present, they were part of the community in the worship service where this would have been read. He's showing us that children are contributing, responsible members of the community, that they have their own role to play in the church. And that role is to listen and obey. That might sound kind of diminutive, sort of insignificant or demeaning, but it makes sense when we consider that children, like all believers, are called to be disciples. That is, people who know his word, who are part of his body, serving and sacrificing, putting the old self to death to be made into the image of God, proclaiming the gospel of reconciliation to make more disciples. But if you can't read, if you don't have the wisdom or the capacity to process theology and to work out how it influences every area of your life, how do you be a disciple? Well, you listen to and submit to a more mature believer. And that principle, it really stands for every believer. If you want to grow in your faith, you look for someone further along than you. In the pastoral epistles, that's 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, Paul gives these young pastors the model for continual mentorship. He tells them to be training people who will continue to train people as they're being trained by Paul. In 2 Timothy 2:22, he tells Timothy to himself pursue those who are pursuing God with a pure heart. Wherever we are in our faith, we should be looking ahead to those who have more spiritual maturity, to those who have more understanding who we can follow after, and then looking back to see who we can be bringing along with us. For children, this process starts with obeying and honoring their parents. And this word obey here, it is a stronger word than the word submit that we see previously. But it does imply a submission to the wisdom and the understanding. It's implied that in obeying the parents will be leading them in knowing God. So for that to work, Paul then turns to address fathers. He tells them, do not provoke or frustrate your children, but raise them up in the discipline and teaching of the Lord. Now, I'm not a parent, so I don't want to try to give you Cody's 10 tips for great parenting, because I have no right to do that. That wouldn't be any good. But I will tell you what I see in Scripture. We see that every believer has been commissioned by Jesus, Matthew 28, to go and make disciples of all people, baptizing them and teaching them the Lord's commands. When we see this language to fathers here, to raise children in the discipline and teaching of the Lord, Paul is refocusing parents on that commission. He's saying that your parenting is an opportunity to disciple your children, to guide them in knowing God and being sanctified by Him. Not just striving to raise, somewhat functional human beings, but raising somewhat functional human beings who know God. That is not to say you're responsible for your children's salvation, but as a parent, you view this task through the lens of the gospel. You view parenting in the context of what Jesus has done for you and for your children, with the mission of seeing them reconciled to God. The point in this whole section on all these relationship dynamics is that our relationships are Christ-focused. They're gospel-framed. In 1 Corinthians 10:31, Paul writes, do all things to the glory of God. That includes the way we relate with one another. Whether you're married or single, whether you have kids or not, and whatever relationships you do have, take the opportunity to glorify God in that relationship, in the way that you submit, in the way you reflect Him. We see this now as Paul moves on to address slaves. And I realize that this is a bit of a contentious topic. It's maybe a bit of a culture shock. Talking about slaves seems sort of archaic and irrelevant. And I'm going to address that in a moment. But first, we don't want to be so distracted by our indignation towards slavery that we miss what Paul is saying here that is very much relevant to us still. What he's saying is that in every relationship, in every situation, just or unjust, comfortable or uncomfortable, our goal is to walk in wisdom and represent Christ well. We might not be slaves, but in whatever work situation we're in, whether we're employees or employers, our thinking is framed by the gospel. That's not to say that you're literally preaching. If you're a carpenter, you're not carving Jesus saves into furniture or icing it onto cakes if you're a baker. But in the way that you work, the way that you serve, you submit to those over you and those under you. What are you saying about who Jesus is? What are you saying about who you are in Jesus? How does your identity in Christ affect the way that you work? If you are children of God, chosen, loved, sealed, you don't need to work for the approval